It's always good to get an apology, and particularly from somebody running a bank with 19 million customers. So thank you for the apology, but it does feel ever so slightly forced. The Treasury made her do this. I have no doubt about that. And I do want to say that the rapid reaction we've had from the British government is superb. Full marks to Andrew Griffith, the City Minister. It also felt a bit like not me, Gov. Well, this committee, the Reputational Risk and Wealth Management Committee, was actually set up as a direct result of her review within the bank system into diversity. So for her to sort of say, well, what's been said here doesn't reflect the views of the bank, well, I'm very sorry, but it does. She mentioned in there the offer of NatWest accounts. No confirmation whether that's just a personal account. Is it a business account? I still don't know, because originally that offer that was made was just for a personal account. On the really big picture, she says that, she understands the public's concerns. Well, what about the 10,000 people who form their own Facebook group? These have all been cancelled by NatWest. Summary cancellations without any explanation. And I know from my inbox over the last few days, there are thousands of people out there, sole traders, small businessmen and women, doing their best, being closed down, close to tears at the way the banks have behaved. And look at the bigger picture of the banks. I mean, they made a profit last year of 35 billion, yet they're closing their branches all over the country. They're really making it tough to pay in cash to banks. They're controlling the way people spend their money. No, we need wholesale review of the entire banking industry and legislation to change things. So it's a start, but it's nowhere near enough. And I'm not going to stop, because I do feel and I do hope that I'm a voice for those thousands of people that have been debanked.
Well, you just mentioned it there. Is it enough? Is it sufficient, the apology, or do you think maybe she should step aside?
I think, rather than just saying right now she ought to go, I think what needs to happen is the Treasury Select Committee needs to reconvene, come out of recess, and let's give her the opportunity to tell us the truth. And there is one very big question here, and it's this. On the 3rd of July, she was photographed sitting at a dinner next to Simon Jack, the BBC's economics correspondent. He phoned me at 10 o'clock on the morning of the 4th of July to tell me the reason my bank account had been closed is I had insufficient funds in the account. When I finally got the subject access request back at that meeting at which that decision was made, it said I was financially viable as a customer. And I want to know, did Alison Rose breach my client confidentiality? Did she break GDPR rules? And I think the only way we can really get to this...
Have you got any evidence of this meeting, other than that you say you saw them together?
There's a photograph being published in the newspapers today of the two of them together at a dinner on the 3rd of July. They sat next to each other throughout the dinner.
How has that been verified exactly?
It's all over it's all over today's Daily Telegraph.
Yeah, but how has it been verified? How do we know that it's accurate?
Because there are photographs of it. Okay. And we believe it to be true. Now, if it's not true, please tell me. But the Telegraph have published this. Nobody has challenged it, all right? So I'll repeat it. The question that I want answered, and this really matters, is Alison Rose sat next to the BBC economics correspondent Simon Jack at a dinner on the evening of the 3rd of July. At 10 o'clock on the morning of the 4th of July, I got a phone call from Simon Jack. He told me that the reason my bank account was being closed was because I had insufficient funds in the account. When I got back the subject access requests, the meeting at which the decision was taken that I would in 2023 be closed out as a customer of Coutts, it said in that meeting at the time that I was financially viable. The real reason, of course, I was closed out is I didn't align with the bank's values. And this matters. Client confidentiality in banking matters. GDPR rules matters. I want answers to those questions before I'm going to say she ought to be sacked, she ought to go. And I think that a Treasury Select Committee is the right place to do that.
So, obviously, the amount of funds in the account is one part, and as you say, you've had the report that you say shows that there was political motivation behind the reason that your account was closed. So, from your perspective, you can tell us now that there was enough funds in the account.
I've been a customer of the group for 43 years. I've been a customer of Coutts since 2014. At no point did anybody ever say you have to have this amount of money in?
It's quite clear on the website, though, isn't it? How much money you need to have.
Purely discretionary. And what's interesting after Simon Jack's comments are the scores of people that email me to say we've got nothing like that money in our accounts, yet we've been clients of Coutts for decades. These things are all discretionary. They were using this, frankly, as a mask to cover up the truth. And if you read through that report, it is full of political vitriol. They do not like the stance that I take on things. But here's the important point. The important point is, everything I've said is within the bounds of genuine free speech, is legitimate, and of course represents majority views in this country and amongst their own 19 million customers. And as I say, I think that report is vitriolic, it's abusive, it's prejudicial, it's vile, and she's attempted, Alison Rose, to distance herself from it today. And I'm sorry, I just don't accept that.
You've obviously given some of that to the Daily Mail. Was that right? That you released the redacted report to the Daily Mail, was it?
Yes, I did.
You released that redacted report to other media outlets like ourselves?
If you want to have the 40 pages, I'll send it to you within the next 10 minutes, and you can read pages 3 and pages 10, which show you the meeting of the 17th of November when that decision was taken. This is not about money in the account. This is about the fact they don't like me.
You've touched on this already, so I'm just going to ask you again if that's okay. You're not the only person that's been affected by banks being cautious about taking on politically exposed people, PEPs, is that right? Is that the right phrase? So you mentioned it. Are you considering any action as a group against the banks yourself and on this issue?
There are many people in public life in Britain who've had trouble with bank accounts, whose children have had trouble with bank accounts, whose parents have had problems with bank accounts, and yet there's not one single example anywhere in modern history of any British politician being involved in money laundering. Yes, we've had expensive scandals and problems, and of course we have, but no examples of money laundering. This legislation came to us in the form of an EU rule. It is over the top, it is excessive, and if we stay with it, it'll put good people off going into public life.
There's some basis to it. It does make some sense to a degree, isn't it? If people, could they get influenced by outside political influences, isn't it?
I really don't believe that my 82-year-old mother is a genuine money laundering risk, and I don't think she should be categorised as a PEP. Under these rules, she is. It's ridiculous.
Okay. The measures announced by the Treasury today, are you happy with them?
I think the way the Treasury have responded to this is tremendous. This problem of what's been going on in the banks, especially with regard to small businesses that take cash and want to pay that cash in to their local accounts, this has been bubbling away. There's not a single MP in Parliament that has not had constituents, crying out for help, saying, what on earth do we do? And here's the reality. In the modern world, without a bank account, you can't exist. It is as essential as water. You can't survive or live without it. You become a non-person. I think what I did, effectively, was to blow the lid off a problem that had been there and bubbling away for a long time. And I absolutely full marks to Andrew Griffith, who is the city minister, the Prime Minister himself, many others. They've responded to this very, very quickly, very decisively. They've already given, a very, very strong piece of guidance that any accounts that are closed must have 3 months' notice and must give a reason for closing the account. That is progress. There's a lot more to be done, but that is progress. Ultimately, where I want to get to is I believe it should be a basic right that everybody should be able to have a bank account and their own business account. And we used to have that until the post office was privatised. Our neighbours in France and Germany have that as a basic right. We used to. It needs to be brought back.
Into public ownership?
No, the right to a bank account.
Okay. So following the apology, you mentioned there that you were offered the NatWest account. It wasn't made clear if it's personal or business. Say it was personal and business. Are you going to take that up? Would you take that up with NatWest, or do you think you should be offered your old Coutts account back? And would you accept that?
I was offered a personal account back at NatWest minutes before I went on air a couple of weeks ago to really push this story out to a wider audience. I did ask at the time, did that include a business account? And I was told there wasn't a solution for it at that time. It is unclear from Alison Rose's letter exactly what I have been offered. I don't know. But if I was to take, let's say, for argument's sake, I got both accounts at NatWest, well, how long would they be good for? How long would it be before they cancel me? Because the problem here is the culture that exists within the NatWest Group. It has become a quasi-political organisation rather than being just a bank.
You also mentioned it's maybe not just an issue with NatWest as well, it's a wider banking issue.
I think it's a cultural issue that has gone through much of corporate Britain over the course of the last few years, that they take stances on LGBT rights, stances on climate change. Coutts and NatWest very proudly, say that they are an inclusive organisation, unless, of course, you have a different point of view. And then they're a very exclusive organisation, and you effectively become excommunicated.
If they were to offer your Coutts account back, would you accept it? Do you think you should be offered that back?
That's a matter entirely in their hands. I haven't even thought about it. The fact is they haven't offered it back. She could have done in the letter. She could have said, look, I'm really sorry. We got this wrong. You can stay banking with us. She didn't do that. She gave an ambiguous, you can go to NatWest, not have any foreign currency services because they don't provide those anymore, and no clarification on the business account. But the real issue here is I've spoken out this week for many thousands of upset, distressed people around this country, and I'm not going to walk away and leave them out to dry. The question now...
We don't know exactly what were the basis of that conversation that happened on the 4th of July.
What I know is that the trusted BBC were told by someone they trusted that the reason the account had been closed was funds, not because I didn't align with the bank's values. That turned out to be untrue, and we've got that in black and white through the subject access request. What I now want to know, given that it was the 4th of July, when that briefing went out, that was accepted by most people in the media, what I want to know is what was said at a dinner on the 3rd of July between Dame Alison Rose, the chief executive of the NatWest Group, and Simon Jack.